Okay, Akash, at Vellum, you built an agent harness from the ground up, really. And the space is moving so quickly. The founders are choosing between different frameworks, how to adopt all the latest standards, whether it be MCP or others, orchestration, workflows, or choosing to build direct to the infra and just go to Kubernetes or something lower level. If you're a startup building today, and when you talk to a lot of the customers you work with, what architectural decisions matter most sort of early on in that journey?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question, Jamie. The way I think about it is that frameworks are a tool to help you get to the desired outcome. There's lots of frameworks out there. They come and go. But usually what I recommend to people is thinking about the user problem and what are the different kinds of abstractions you want to create, intentionally the abstractions you want to create that will be resilient as your system grows and scales. So I break down these abstractions into 3 different buckets. One is what does the model do versus what's deterministic. Now, obviously, the dream is that the model does everything, right? But there's some things the model shouldn't do. The model should not be touching credentials. The model should not be on the permissions layer, and maybe a few more things like that. So deciding what the model does versus does not do is the first abstraction, because the model is excellent at coming up with UIs on the fly, coming up with novel user experiences, coming up with great responses, picking tools. Model can do so much. But there's some things the model should and should not do. Within that's the next abstraction is which model to pick. Now, in an agentic system, there's so many different choices that you have. You have a memory system, you have a planning system, you have tool calls, you have the actual conversation itself. There might be some other UI treatments you want to do around the main conversation. So there's many different sub-processes going on at the same time. And deciding what model to pick for each task is super important. I would not recommend just choosing one model or one model provider for everything. Being agnostic and deciding what to pick is, again, the decision of whoever's building this product. And the last abstraction, I would say, is the context abstraction, which I touched upon briefly earlier. But again, remember, context is a very scarce resource. So deciding what goes in and out of context is super important. And if a framework helps you with any of these 3 decisions, then please go for it. But again, thinking backwards from how you want the user experience to work and what the model does versus doesn't do is extremely important.
All right, well then let's zoom out and talk a little bit more about the AI agent tech stack. Beyond the model itself, we started to talk through a bunch of these pieces, but we've got memory, tool access, evaluation, orchestration, observability, the context management. I'd love to hear from each of you in the past maybe 6 months even. What is the piece that kind of became the most crucial and non-optional that you're seeing right now? Feel free, anyone who wants to jump in to start.
I think one thing which is clear is that LLMs becoming smarter, right? And we've been talking about agents for years, but yeah. I think right now we are actually getting to the point when people believe that they are real, right? You actually can put real use cases in production, which also means that you have longer sessions, right? And you have more interesting tools. And the other part is obviously sandboxes. It's practically all the code, especially coding agents. We kind of started to. It wasn't clear a year ago that the file system is the abstraction, right? And right now it looks like a lot of that is practically centered around file systems, around bash commands and others. Maybe it will go away, right? We don't know how long it will, because we can train model not to use file system, but at least right now it looks like everyone is converging that. And what we see is that in our users and customers is that just managing sandboxes at scale, right? And is non-trivial task, right? Yep. We have customers which are practically, okay, what if I have 10 million sandboxes running right now, right? And I have failure modes around that. And then I need to actually orchestrate other things around them. And then it practically goes around the whole other part, which is about tools like MCP, for example. Initially was just designed for practically run inside of IDE, right? It never was meant to do stateless, it never was done for scale, right? You cannot do, there's just 8 stateless sessions, it's very stateful. And then they just introduced task. But before that, you couldn't have a tool call which takes 3 hours, right? It just wasn't impossible. But in real life, you always have tools which take long time, and especially humans in the loop, and you need to do all sort of workarounds for that. And this is, I think, one part which you need to start thinking about, okay, these things are long running, they can fail, they orchestrate real infrastructure, and you need to have practically a system which encompasses all of that.
Yep, makes total sense.
So I'll just add that what we're seeing, especially as it comes to software delivery, is coding was never really just the bottleneck. It takes about 20 to 30% of the time in the software delivery lifecycle. And we've been talking about that at GitLab for several years now, that if coding is getting much faster, we have to consider using AI across all stages of the SDLC. So now you have multiple agents. So you have a planner agent to help you with the planning stage, a security agent to help you with addressing and triaging security issues. And now you have to think about that agent orchestration across multiple agents. And especially as you go from the individual developer workstation with tools in the IDE and the CLI to the team level and to the enterprise level. So now you elevate and talk about not just individual agent orchestration, but platform level orchestration across multiple teams, across the enterprise, keeping in mind various standards around traceability, observability, governance, and control points across that. So it's really the platform level orchestration with governance built in.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to build on all of that, right? So what we already know and like talk about a lot on the agent tech stack is memory, tool calls, evals, sandboxing, orchestration. I want to introduce a new concept or like something to just strongly consider is a like robust permissions layer. So people may have seen these tweets in January about dangerously skip permissions, and people are joking around about how they use Cloud Code at scale. Yes, it's valid that some people do that, but people like developers who are building their own agents should be very careful on how permissions are collected from the user, because again, as we all know, agents take actions in the real world. They can make tool calls, they can send emails, they can review your bank statements, and the list goes on. They can run bash commands and stuff. So now what's the right UX balance? Like having a yes-no permission dialogue every single time could be annoying for the user. Dangerously skip permissions could be risky for the user. So what is one supposed to do? My advice here is, again, something that we're implementing as we go along, and it's really complicated, is basically coming up with a robust permissions and trust layer, which determines based on like various like heuristics, both deterministic and non-deterministic, on how risky an action is. That can be classified into an enum of like 1 to 5 scale. And based on that, you can then decide how you want the user experience to work. So in our case, for example, if there's background tasks running, maybe a low risk or medium risk task is okay to run in the background. But for a high or very high risk task, you would want the user to actually approve everything that's going on. So really thinking about how to collect user input while performing agentic actions is a new and emerging concept that is increasingly relevant.
Last set of questions from me. We'll do sort of a rapid fire round, and shortest answer wins. So try and keep your answers short. So to start first, what's the biggest mistake that startups make when building systems built around agents?
Yeah, from my kind of point of view is that think about that they're distributed systems, right? They're building distributed systems and just think up front.
Right.
And also, again, it's very easy to get very immense scale with AI. And we've seen examples when companies scaled like instantaneously almost. It's unprecedented.
You have to plan for that.
And you should kind of be ready for that. Like this old style of build something and then you will rewrite it next 3 years. If you're successful, just doesn't work. You will be just
yeah, makes total sense.
I see all the time when worked in a large enterprise, not considering security and governance constraints within a large enterprise. So that I'll keep it short. That's it.
100% agree, though. That's great.
I'll go back to what I've been saying. I think the biggest mistake is treating context like it's free. Yes, context windows keep going up, but context is a scarce resource, and using that wisely is a big mistake that people make if they don't do it correctly.